Hello everyone, my name is Choi Woo-jin and I'm glad to meet you to make a presentation about this paper. The title of this paper is Consumers as Financiers, Consumer Surplus, Crowdfunding and Initial Coin Offerings. Actually, this paper is about crowdfunding and is provides at the pros and cons of crowdfunding and their characteristics. And this paper has written by two co-authors, J.M. Lee, Washington University professors, and Kristen Powler, UC Berkeley professor. And this paper has been published May of this year in the Review of Financial Studies. As you may know, where crowdfunding could raise money directly from a lot of small investors. It's a kind of somewhat different from the traditional funding, because traditional funding is indirect or just through the intermediary, just bank loan or corporate bonds they are funded from the security companies or bank, but crowdfunding raising money directly from a number of people. So you can see that this diagram, business or startups provide ideas through the crowdfunding. Just crowdfunding is just performed through the internet or web media. And they provide idea and provide investment possibility or opportunity to backers or investors. They are just investors. So the investors evaluate the idea or project is good or bad. And if they evaluate or judge it is good, they fund that project and give also advice. So this circulation or this diagram is at the characteristic of crowdfunding. So second, the pros and cons from the viewpoint of entrepreneur or businessman. The pros there's not much financial risk. Actually, crowdfunding enables business person to test the waters to see whether their idea has merit without taking a financial risk. And second, their campaign, the businessman's campaign could go viral. So exposing their product to a number of persons they are not unable to otherwise reach without crowdfunding. And a successful campaign validates business idea. But cons-wise, it takes time and money, and their campaign might not succeed. And someone could steal their idea, and the businessman have to pay several fees to crowdfunding platform companies. So the main findings of this paper is two things. One, crowdfunding can improve productive efficiency by funding some project or business. More detailed, crowdfunding is more effective relative to compared with traditional intermediary funding when the entrepreneur or businessman has little market power and the project is short-term. That means supposing that the businessman or entrepreneur has a large market power, they can easily get funded from the traditional intermediary funding, such as bank loan or corporate bonds. But the businessman has a little market power. They cannot get easily get funded from traditional. But crowdfunding is very effective when the businessman has a little market power. And second, resale market for consumers' claims could heighten the consumption benefit. This means that the resale market means that the initial investors of crowdfunding has set their claim for the project or business, and they can transfer their claims to other person. So we just called it resale market, and resale market could heighten the consumption benefit. But however, crowdfunding with the resale market, as in the case of initial coin offerings, mitigates, reduce, or decrease consumer surplus, but does not eliminate or rule out the consumer surplus or inefficient underinvestment. That means, as per the consumer surplus, Consumer surplus is that the difference between the maximum price the consumer willing to pay and market price, the difference. For example, when the businessman is a brilliant jjajangmyeon or is very delicious jjajangmyeon and the consumer willing to pay 10,000 won, 10,000 won, but the market price is just 7,000 won. So the difference 3,000 won is just called the difference 3,000 won called consumer surplus. But resale, so crowdfunding, initial investors just initially invest the maximum price. But resale market is that the maximum price will be go down. So there's all so the resale market could not eliminate the consumer surplus totally. What I liked this paper is that the authors have provide a detailed theoretical analysis of crowdfunding using a lot of propositions and formulas. And they have conducted in-depth examination of models to present various testable implications. So they studied a lot of consumers' direct participation in funding decisions for productive efficiency. And second, they materialize or realize a good idea. The one thing they have discovered a simple model of crowdfunding that emphasizes a lot of consumer surplus. As I told you, the difference between maximum price and the market price. And they have found out that the uniqueness of crowdfunding is the ability of consumers to commit to pay for the consumer benefit. That means crowdfunding, initial funding, as I told you, the initial investors or are just as consumers, they invest at the maximum price today they are willing to pay. So there is the uniqueness of crowdfunding. And crowdfunding works as a commitment device for consumers. Okay, but what I dislike about this paper is two things. One is lack of empirical analysis. They provide or they conducted only theoretical analysis. So conducting only theoretical analysis without empirical analysis is insufficient in the reliability and evidence. And second, this paper, the most part of this paper has been written from the viewpoint of businessman or entrepreneur. So analysis from the perspective of investors. Investors analysis is missing. Actually, I think that in the crowdfunding there are a lot of pros and cons or strong point and weak point. And especially for investors, there are a lot of risks, such as the inability to guarantee investment principle. Guarantee principle is failure, or that the possibility of a project failure, or lack of actual product development. So there is a lot of risk. So I think, but that kind of thing is that the missing in this paper. So my suggestion is that it would be much better to conduct empirical analysis based on reliable data from crowdfunding platform companies. And I think it's much better for the effective and reliable with the empirical analysis. And second, it's necessary to analyze the pros and cons of crowdfunding from an investor's viewpoint. And I think that compare the advantages and disadvantages or strong and weak points of the crowdfunding from an investor's point of view. And finally, to provide the accurate investment guidelines accordingly. And I think it's much would be better. Okay, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.